What's up, Tenno? It's Tenno Prime checking in from the orbiter. I needed to earn 7,000 standing for Nora's Mix Nightwave, so I jumped into an arbitration mission, and for this one, I brought my full Immortal Nyx setup. I'm running Nyx with the Sentinel companion Nautilus using the Verglass, and my heavy weapon is the Cortege Archgun. With the new Archgun Arcane adapters, I can now equip both primary and secondary Arcanes, making this weapon even more powerful. So we're testing everything here in this mission: durability, crowd control, and raw damage.
I'm running this mission in public because I figured the more players there are, the more Vitus Essence we can collect. I'll be playing alongside other Tennos, but my plan is to stay for about an hour to really test this build, see how well it holds up, and how much damage it can dish out over time.
Once the mission starts, I'm going to head to a comfortable spot where I can properly test the Cortege. I want to see how it performs in real arbitration conditions, its beam consistency, ammo sustain, and how fast it builds up the alternate fire. It's a good chance to check how it interacts with the new Archgun Arcanes, and whether the damage output stays stable over time. The ability that makes me effectively immortal here is Nyx's fourth power, Absorb, combined with its Augment mod, Assimilate. Absorb lets Nyx draw in all incoming damage into a psychic barrier, while Assimilate converts that effect into a mobile bubble. Inside it, Nyx becomes completely invulnerable, even to Eximus toxin auras that usually kill on contact. In arbitration missions, that's vital, since there's no self-revive. If you go down, you can only come back if a squad mate revives you, and in solo runs, that means instant mission failure.
For this setup, I'm running the Cortege with Heat and Viral. Heat is especially effective against Infested since it deals bonus damage and applies a damage over time effect that keeps them burning even after you stop firing. The weapon doesn't have any physical damage types like Slash, which would have been perfect for status procs, so I'm pairing Heat with Viral, which amplifies damage to health by up to 325% after applying multiple stacks. This combo works great for cutting through infested mobs quickly, even without Slash procs.
It's a low-level arbitration at the start, but the enemy's scaling ramps up fast, and soon Eximus units start flooding the map. Still, with this build, I'm confident they're gonna melt instantly. Between the Heat and Viral combo on the Cortege and Nyx's damage absorption, I shouldn't have any trouble clearing them out effortlessly.
I'll be using Nyx's third ability, Chaos, quite a lot during the mission. It spreads radiation to all enemies in range, forcing them to attack each other instead of me, which helps control the field and reduce incoming pressure on the bubble. I'm also running the Universal Arcane Fallout, which restores energy whenever enemies are affected by radiation status effects. That's what keeps my Assimilate bubble active, since Absorb consumes a lot of energy over time. I could also use Equilibrium for extra energy sustain, but I don't think I'll need it, especially near the end of the mission when there'll be so many enemies feeding me energy orbs constantly.
I just realized that while I'm using the Archgun, I can't activate the synthesis scanner at the same time. That means I have to deactivate Absorb first, which leaves me completely vulnerable to enemy fire. On top of that, unequipping the Archgun triggers its cooldown, so I'll have to wait a few minutes before I can deploy it again. Still, I really want to scan this Cephalon fragment, so I'm going to stay without the Archgun for a while. There's still plenty of time left to test the build, and since my teammates are running all over the map, enemies won't be focusing on me for now. These are the kind of details you only learn through experience. Nobody really tells you that you can't freely switch to the synthesis scanner while using the Archgun. It's one of those hidden inconveniences you just have to adapt to. Another thing to watch out for is the Archgun ammo management. If you run out of ammo, the weapon automatically deactivates and triggers a cooldown of around 4 minutes, which can completely break your rhythm in missions like this. To make it worse, enemies drop very little Archgun ammo,
so it's not until you've been in a mission for about half an hour that you start to build up a decent reserve. It's definitely something every Tenno using heavy weapons should keep in mind.
Arbitrations are special endgame missions unlocked after clearing the entire star chart. They're designed to push both your survivability and efficiency to the limit. The enemies start at a higher level than usual and scale fast, so every minute that passes, the challenge increases noticeably. The best part about arbitrations is the reward pool. They're one of the most reliable sources of endo in the game, and you also earn Vitus Essence, which can be exchanged for rare mods, arcanes, or cosmetics from the Arbiters of Hexus. That makes every run feel worthwhile, especially for players who like testing and fine-tuning their builds.
During these missions, you have to watch out for the Arbitration shield drones, small floating units that link to nearby enemies, making them completely immune to all forms of damage and Warframe abilities. As long as a drone is active, you can't hurt the enemies it's protecting, so the smart move is to target those drones first. Once they're destroyed, the enemies drop fast, but you always need to stay alert because more drones keep spawning as time goes on. It's one of those hidden details that separate casual runs from efficient ones. Understanding where your damage should go first can make the difference between clearing waves smoothly or getting overrun.
I've finally been able to deploy the Archgun again, and I'm still holding position, but there aren't many enemies around right now. I'm going to wait until my teammates leave the area so I can properly test the build's effectiveness on my own. That way, I can see exactly how the setup performs without shared kills or overlapping damage. For this build, I'm using the Subsume ability, Roar, which boosts both weapon and ability strength, giving me more overall power during the mission. I decided to replace Mind Control, Nyx's first ability. It's one of my favorites. I love using it with its Augment Mind Freak, especially on Acolytes. Once controlled, they fight for me with increased strength and speed, turning into temporary allies that hit incredibly hard. But for this run, I don't really need it. Since the focus is on testing the Cortege's raw power and overall damage scaling, I swapped Mind Control for Roar to amplify my firepower even further.
Nyx's second ability is Psychic Bolts. When activated, she launches a group of homing projectiles that seek out enemies and strip away their armor, shields, and aura effects depending on the faction. It's excellent for weakening high-level enemies before engaging. The augment for this ability, Pacifying Bolts, adds 3 extra projectiles and guarantees radiation status on every hit, briefly stunning affected enemies. It's a solid option for extra crowd control and status application, but for this run, I won't be using it. The focus is on raw weapon testing with the Cortege.
Nyx's passive now directly enhances her offensive potential. She gains plus 40% critical chance on her primary and secondary weapons for every enemy that's confused or affected by radiation within her affinity range, up to a maximum of plus 200%. This passive perfectly complements her abilities like Chaos and Psychic Bolts, which can spread radiation procs and confusion across the battlefield, allowing her to build up massive crit potential just by controlling enemies. It's an excellent bonus for weapon-focused Nyx builds, especially when you keep large groups of enemies under radiation effects. The more chaos she spreads, the stronger her weapon fire becomes. However, I'm not entirely sure if this passive also applies to Archguns like the Cortege. Since Archguns operate under a separate weapon category, their interaction with Warframe passives isn't always consistent. Still, if it does apply, that would make this setup even more powerful. Combining radiation spreading abilities with a high crit weapon could push the Cortege's performance way beyond expectations. Either way, the synergy between Nyx's crowd control and weapon buffs makes her incredibly fun to use in long missions like this one.
Alright, Tenno. I'm going to leave the rest of the video running with the original gameplay audio, so you can see how the build performs in real time. I'll come back at the end to show you the complete builds and mod setups for both Nyx and the Cortege. If you found the video interesting, or if it helped you in any way, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep posting more Warframe content like this. Thanks for watching, and see you at the end of the mission.
saturation is nearing critical mass. After that point, no amount of life support will save you. Life support has been replenished. We will all share in this bounty. Hold out as long as you can. Additional life support has arrived. Another life support capsule is now available. Life support activated. I've delivered another life support capsule. Life support has been replenished. Additional life support has arrived. The longer you fight, the more successful we will be. Life support activated. Life support has been replenished. Life support activated. Another life support capsule is now available. Life support has been replenished. Look what our Tenno operative just found. They could not do this without you. almost completely saturated the atmosphere. You need to get out of there. Life support activated. The longer you fight, the more successful we will be. Life support has been replenished. Another life support capsule is now available. Delivered another life support capsule. Life support activated. Life support has been replenished. Life support has been replenished. Additional life support has arrived. share in this bounty. Hold out as long as you can. Life support activated. Additional life support has arrived. Look what our Tenno operative just found. They could not do this without you. Life support activated. Another life support capsule is now available. Life support has been replenished. I've delivered another life support capsule. Look what our Tenno operative just found. They could not do this without you. The spores have almost completely saturated the atmosphere. You need to get out of there. Life support has been replenished. Life support activated. Additional life support has arrived. Life support activated. The longer you fight, the more successful we will be. Delivered another life support capsule. Another life support capsule is now available. Life support has been replenished. all share in this bounty. Hold out as long as you can. Additional life support has arrived.
All right, let's check out the loot from the mission. Looks like we pulled in around 200,000 credits, a full Iatan sculpture, 5,000 endo, and about 25 Vetus essence. Not bad at all for a single arbitration run. The endo alone makes these missions worth repeating, but the Vetus essence is really what adds up over time, since it can be traded for exclusive arcanes, mods, and cosmetics from the Arbiters of Hexus. This run lasted about 54 minutes, and while I didn't get a huge round of Vetus essence, the endo gains were excellent. That's pretty typical for arbitrations. The rewards can vary depending on the mission type and rotation. Some rotations tend to drop more Vetus, while others lean heavily toward endo and Iatan sculptures. Either way, the total payout is always solid if you can stay in long enough and keep the efficiency up.
On top of that, we also picked up 4 Arcanes and a handful of resources along the way, which adds even more value to the run. Overall, it was a solid session. Good rewards, a strong test for the build, and plenty of data to see how the setup performs in long missions.
Alright, now let's head straight into the Immortal Nyx build. It focuses on keeping Nyx completely untouchable while maintaining enough power strength and efficiency to keep her abilities active for long periods and make Nyx practically invincible.
Let's start with the Aura mod, Summoner's Wrath. This mod increases the damage output of all companions, including Sentinels, making it a perfect fit for this build. Since I'm running an Immortal Nyx setup with a Sentinel that stays alive the entire mission, boosting its offensive power makes perfect sense. The aura enhances the companion's weapon damage significantly, allowing my Nautilus to hit much harder with the Verglass, melting enemies that get too close to me while I stay protected inside the Assimilate bubble. In other words, while Nyx holds her ground and absorbs all incoming fire, my Sentinel becomes a lethal perimeter defense system, cleaning up anything that dares to enter its range. For the Exilus slot, I went with Rush, which increases my sprint speed by up to plus 30% at max rank, since using Absorb with the Augment Assimilate helps compensate by giving me better mobility when I need to reposition or evade.
I'm using Prime Flow for extra energy capacity, Amar's Anguish for increased movement speed, and Armored Agility for an additional speed boost and extra armor.
Assimilate is the augment for Nyx's fourth ability Absorb, and it's what makes her effectively immortal. It lets Nyx move slowly while channeling Absorb, maintaining full invulnerability to all incoming damage, even from Eximus units or toxin effects. While active, every attack absorbed is converted into stored damage, which can then be released as a powerful radio blast when the ability ends.
I'm using Umbral Intensify for more power strength, Augur Reach for greater range, Blind Rage for an additional boost in strength, Primed Continuity to keep my abilities active longer and maintain consistent uptime during the mission.
I'm using Molt Augmented for additional ability strength over time, and Arcane Universal Fallout to keep my energy constantly regenerating. Since I spread radiation with chaos, enemies affected by it drop energy orbs when they die, helping me sustain the Assimilate bubble indefinitely.
I replaced Mind Control with Roar to gain more overall power and boost both my weapon and ability damage.
For the Archon shards, I'm using one Tau-forged Azure shard for extra energy capacity, 2 Amber shards for increased parkour velocity, and 1 Amber shard for faster casting speed.
I'm using the Praetos melee purely as a utility weapon, mainly for the bonus parkour velocity and sprint speed it provides.
Now for the Archgun, the Cortege. This weapon has a unique trait that allows it to switch between 2 firing modes. Its primary fire is a continuous heat beam that deals steady damage and builds up charge as you kill enemies. Once that charge is full, you can switch to the alternate fire, which launches 3 explosive plasma grenades that detonate on impact, creating lingering zones of heat damage.
For the Cortege build, I'm using Prime dual rounds for extra multi-shot, Parallax Scope to boost critical chance, and hollowed bullets for increased critical damage. Then I combined Contamination Casing and Hypothermic Shells to create Viral, and added Magma Chamber for heat damage, which stacks perfectly with my Riven mod that also adds heat, further enhancing both critical chance and critical damage. Altogether, it's a high-status, high-crit setup that melts through enemies fast once the beam gets going.
I'm also using Primed Rubetto Line Barrel for a massive boost to base damage, which makes every other stat hit even harder.
For the secondary arcane, I'm using Cascadia Flare. It increases secondary weapon damage by plus 12% for each heat status effect applied, and each stack lasts for 10 seconds, up to a maximum of plus 480% bonus damage. Since the Cortege constantly applies heat procs, this arcane keeps the weapon's damage ramping steadily throughout the mission. For the primary arcane, I'm using Primary Deadhead. On headshot kill, it grants plus 120% damage for 24 seconds, stacking up to plus 360% total damage. It also provides plus 30% headshot multiplier and minus 50% recoil while active. Even though the Cortege doesn't rely heavily on precision shots, the consistent damage boost and recoil reduction make it an excellent choice for long endurance runs.
For the Nautilus Prime, I'm running Cordon to pull enemies together for easier beam hits, and Assault Mode so it automatically attacks nearby targets. Contagious Bond spreads 50% of status effects from killed enemies to others nearby, while Manifold Bond lets the Sentinel apply more status and reduces cooldowns when I kill multi-status targets.
Then I've got Vacuum for loot pickup, Primed Regen to reduce the Sentinel's recovery time, Shield Charger and Accelerated Deflection for faster shield regeneration, and Fired Up to ramp up the Veriglass damage the longer it fires. Finally, Duplex Bond creates up to 3 Sentinel clones for 30 seconds every time I spend 100 energy. Although in this build the Sentinel is practically immortal, the defensive mods could easily be swapped for more offensive options.
For the Verglass Prime build, I'm using Cryo Rounds and Malignant Force to create Viral, and Hellfire with Thermite Rounds to add heat for that powerful Viral plus Heat combo. Serration boosts overall damage,
Galvanized Chamber increases multi-shot with stacking bonuses. Vigilante Armaments adds even more multi-shot, and Rifle Elementalist enhances elemental damage. It's a fast ramping setup that shreds enemies once the procs start stacking.
That's it for this run, Tenno. The Immortal Nyx and Cortege combo worked perfectly. Solid damage and great survivability. If you found the video helpful or interesting, remember to subscribe. It really helps the channel keep growing. See you in the next one.